This is the DRF Players Podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Thomas Fornatel and Jonathan Kinchin.
Hello and welcome to the Kentucky Derby edition of the DRF Players Podcast. It's May 3rd, show 333. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatel, back with you in the Brooklyn bunker, not making the trip to Louisville this year, but very excited to talk about all the goings-on down there. I'll first introduce my regular co-host. You know him, you love him. He gives out winners like other people eat breakfast, seemingly, once or twice a day. And he's the people's champion. He's Jonathan Kinchin. JK, what's going on?
I'm at Thurby. I'm hanging out in the media room. I figure if it's good enough for Steve Bick, it's good enough for me. There's some ambient noise in the background. Pete, I'm sorry, but I'll be muting when I'm not talking. And it's exciting here. It looks like it's going to rain a little bit, which isn't exciting, but it's still Derby week. We'll work through it.
Just don't upset those important working press, man. You got a lot of people on some very serious deadlines right now. Hopefully, nobody's going to want to hurl you out of that press box before the hour.
I'm on the camera side of things, so I don't think anyone's really being quiet over here. Like I said, I'm about 3 rows away from Steve Bick, so if he can get away with it, sure I can try.
I don't know, JK. I've worked with Steve Bick. I've known Steve Bick a long time. You're no Steve Bick. So you got there's different rules for guys like us than guys like that. But with that said, we're going to introduce our special guest, custom picked. So happy to have him joining us today. This is a man, you've heard him on the show before. If he had devoted the amount of intelligence and energy that he spent in his life to handicapping and understanding horse racing, if he'd taken that energy and channeled it in another direction, civilian space flight would surely be a reality by now. I'm talking about my co-author on Betting with an Edge, the great Mike Maloney. Mike, how are things?
Wow, things are good, Pete. Quite the introduction, or I could be in prison. I may have gone the wrong direction with all that mental energy. So, loving life, enjoying Derby weekend here from the luxurious Red Mile.
I like it. We'll call it a win then, with civilian civilian space flight on one end of the continuum and prison on the other. We'll call life as a professional horse player a win.
Yes.
We're going to dive in and talk about these undercard races. I know it's early. On the undercard races, we're not going to be, especially you, Mike, as our guest, not going to be holding your feet to the fire on final selections or specifics of betting thoughts. But JK and I will try to give selections on each of these races. Also, I want to leave a little bit of time in the show later, JK, a couple of traditions that you have. I want to get your thoughts, or at least direct people to where they can find your thoughts on the famous Derby Day Pick 6, one of the wagers upon which you've made your reputation. And JK, you've also mentioned on the show before the bet you like to give out for your dad and his friends, the Derby superfecta bet. We had some requests for you to offer that up. And then hopefully, if there's time at the end, we'll get Mike to tell us a little tale from the track. That's basically the agenda. It all starts with the Humana Distaff. JK, we're going to bring you in first to get your thoughts on this race. Who do you like in here?
Yeah, no, I was hoping that Ivy Bell was going to run here, and from what I understand, she probably will run here. Last time had an awful trip, first time for Todd, off the switch from the lesser known trainer than Todd Pletcher. Had a tough bobble at the start, was blocked. Finally got out and ran well. I think she can be tough in this spot. She was 12-1 in La Troyenne. She's 5-1 morning line here. Finley's Lucky Charm has always been one that I've respected, but I think she's going to have it a little bit tough, drawn from the inside. An American Gal, I think, might be able to turn the tables on her based on the last race at Keeneland. But my top pick is going to be Ivy Bell, but I will have a little American Gal as well to try to turn the tables.
You took my pick, JK. I'm definitely team Ivy Bell, hoping she shows up here. I'm hoping this is a situation where it doesn't necessarily look like it's going to be blazing on paper, but with speed at either end of the gate, with speed on the far inside and the far outside in the two fillies that you mentioned, I'm hoping it'll hot up a little bit more and set up for her. That was the only thing I had to offer in there different than what you said. Mike, did you have a chance to look at this race and you have a thought to offer?
Yes, I had a chance to look it over well, Pete. I'm going to go on the American Gal train also. I think this is going to be a perfect outside Cali stalking trip here. Something she should be comfortable with. I checked on Simon Callahan, just did a little formulator work, and second off the layoff, off this type of layoff, my research showed 31% winners in the last 2 years with a over a $3 ROI. So he's good with this move, and I can't see any bad trip that American Gal can get. If you watch Churchill races, 7 furlongs, the inside can tend to break a little slow. That could compromise Finley's Lucky Charm. I kind of like American Gal a little bit better anyway. I think Ivy Bell is definitely the other horse. Don't know how much she'll improve, but you think the sky's the limit with this recent trainer move from Bill Denzik, and very compromised by racing luck last time, Ivy Bell. So I think she's definitely the other horse, and my wild card in the race, or the horse that I would protect myself with, would be Sky Diamonds.
Interesting. What is it you like about Sky Diamonds?
Well, I think she's hit or miss. I heard someone mention, I've been trying to get as much Derby Day info as I can, and I heard someone mention that Bill Sparr hadn't run a horse in Kentucky for a number of years. So
Nick Tamaro today on the podcast.
Yes, and Nick's a very sharp guy. I enjoyed that. You could be a stand-up comedian apparently too, because a lot of that stuff was totally hilarious. But any Santa Anita shipper, any Southern Cal shipper in these races is a wild card horse to me that I need to cover with. When they've shown when they run the numbers in Southern Cal, that sometimes can transfer to Churchill. I remember, I think, a Sadler horse maybe a few years ago that ran huge in the Humana Distaff. So that's just a horse that I do not want to get beat by. But I'm going to base the majority of my play with American Gal and Ivy Bell.
One other footnote on Bill Sparr: while he did not have a Kentucky shipper in the 5-year formulator sample back in 2011, he did successfully ship to various places in the country, including Churchill, I think, for the Breeders' Cup with Amazombie. So it is a club he has in his bag, even if he doesn't do it very often. Let's move on to the Distaff Turf Mile. Mike, we'll keep it with you for a thought on this one.
Don't have a lot of opinions among the other horses in here, but I clearly like Dream a While. She's an improving filly for Chad. I like her versatility. She's shown just in a handful of starts, 8 lifetime starts and only 3 in the States. She's shown in those 3 starts that she can deep close, that she can intend a pace. But no matter what position she's in early in the race, she seems to always finish well. So in the great hands of Chad Brown, that has to be my key in the Distaff Mile.
I think we're going to probably land on the same horse here again, JK. I'll let you go first. I'll let you beat me to the punch.
Really? Are you sure about that?
I'm not sure, but it's a horse we talked about at the time. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm frustrated about how Proctor's Ledge has run now in her 4-year-old year, but she's had some kind of tough trips. She's been wide in her last 2 starts. I kind of want to give her another look here. I also want to find a horse that's going to luck into that forwardly placed trip. There's really not a lot of speed in here. I would assume that Psycho Sister is going to try to send from the outside. Otherwise, she's got 0 chance of winning. So I want to know who's going to kind of sit that trip. And one of the horses that I felt like possibly could do that was Thundering Sky. She's been running out in California, but I think she might end up getting kind of that pocket trip, get covered up. Hopefully, Rajiv will kind of put her in the race to kind of at least get some position going forward, and then she could be finishing when they turn for home. But it doesn't seem like there's a lot of pace in here. And if Irad can find himself forward with Dream a While, she might be pretty tough.
Yeah, Dream a While makes a ton of sense. But Thundering Sky was the horse I was talking about, just off the kind of horror show of a trip last time. She didn't have bad luck in that race. She had no luck at all. And chance, I think, to improve. Anyway, second start off the layoff, projects a good journey, and I think should be a very square price. I feel like we should at least mention On Leave in here. JK, did you give her any count?
No, I mean, I thought she's. I mean, obviously, every time you see a shug horse that's well bred like this, you always double take. But she got a pretty good setup last time with Lowell, went pretty fast. If you'll remember, she was flying around there early, and On Leave took back was fifth. A majority of the race. Look, she can definitely get it done. When talking about the pick six, I feel like this is the first leg. You're going to have to spread pretty deep in here because whoever ends up getting the best trip is going to end up winning this one. It's not going to be the horse that probably is the best. It's going to be the best trip that wins this one. So, and then obviously you got to figure out what's going to happen with the surface. I believe it's raining now. It's supposed to rain a little bit tomorrow, and I've heard the forecast now is for Saturday as well. So you got to keep an eye out for that and find some fillies that can handle the soft going.
Just a little weather update. I took Nick Tamaro's advice, popped up weather.gov. Right now, we've got a 60% chance of showers for Friday, 50-50 Friday night, and they're saying 40% on Saturday. So that really, to me, and Mike, you know this better than me, that to me feels like it could go absolutely any way forecast in Kentucky. There could be no rain. It could be a deluge.
It could be. I hope we don't get a ton of rain on Friday, Pete, because the Churchill track is known to take a lot of water very well. It's a great draining track. So if we can get by Friday without a complete washout, then it's amazing what track maintenance can do up there to get at least a good to fast track on Saturday.
All right, we'll be keeping our eyes open. Look to DRF Live for updates on the weather. And obviously, it does make finalizing picks a little bit tricky, but we'll keep that weather in mind from this far out. Let's move on to the Churchill Downs, Grade 2, going 7 furlongs. Mike, who did you come up with here?
This race narrowed down to me, Pete. Not a lot of prices here, nothing earth-shattering. But, sometimes, especially on a day like Derby Day, I don't necessarily need to split an atom and find a 20-1 shot. If I can find even a couple of favorites that I have total confidence in, that I feel like stand out, the exactas will overpay. The trifectas will overpay even in that situation, just because there's so much loose money in the pools. I see the Churchill Downs as just the two horses here, Imperial Hint and Awesome Slew. They stand out on my figures, and I'm going to give a slight lean to Imperial Hint, because as I design the race, I see Chief Chicatriz leading, horse coming from Turf Paradise, never been the distance. It looks like it could set up for a perfect stalking trip for Imperial Hint. And I think that might give him the edge that he would need to hold on over Awesome Slew.
JK, for you, is it as simple as those two? And what are you hearing? You're the one in the press box. What are you hearing about Awesome Slew's whereabouts? Will it be 2 turns on Friday, or will it be the 1 turn on Saturday here?
I'm not sure about Awesome Slew. I would imagine if the weather is a little bit dicey, if it does get a little bit, if it rains today or rains tomorrow, they might just kind of wait till the second race, the Churchill Downs. But we'll see what happens with him. I agree with Mike. He's a likely winner and definitely an A horse if he's in. But I'm leaning towards Imperial Hint as well. And this is a Paul Matisse thing. I wish he was here to talk about it a little bit more, because I'll probably butcher it if I try to talk about it. But there's a way that you can look at pace figures where Imperial Hint is kind of uplining, where he is where he's at like the furlong call. He's actually finishing the race rather than slowing down late. I think that's important for a horse who's going to be stretching from predominantly 6 to 7. Obviously, he's run well at 7 before, but mostly at 6. So I think he's going to be super tough. And I think it's interesting. We talked about it after Whitmore won at Oaklawn last time in the Count Fleet. I think Paul Matisse actually tweeted that, if he keeps getting out, he's not going to be able to beat the good horses. But I think it's interesting that he's drawn inside. So he can't get out when he's drawn inside. So I think if he can stay comfortable down in there and they run a little bit in front of him, he could be dangerous running late. And if you remember last year when it got a little moisture in the track, the inside became a very favorable place to be at Churchill. Mike could probably speak more to that if it's a consistent thing that happens. But I think Whitmore is one that I would consider. Imperial Hint is the one that I'm going to try to key around.
I'll let Mike answer that question about the inside and the wet. Is there a pattern when you're making your bias notes, Mike, of what happens when it gets wet down on the inside?
Yes, more often than not, that will help the rail when you get a lot of moisture in the track. But that it's not an always. But more often than not, it tends to play that way.
One other horse I just feel like I need to put up in here is Limousine Liberal, who I feel like is coming into the race in similar fashion to last year, made the big step up, second off the layoff there, and was one, while I like all the horses the team mentioned, is one that I wouldn't let be beating me when it comes to the picks. Let's go on to the American Turf. And JK, this time we'll start with you.
Yeah, this is a tough one, and I think that Rushing Fall might come into play here. If it does get a little bit wet today and tomorrow, they might actually scratch her and run her on Saturday. So keep that in mind when looking at this race to see if she shows up. Obviously Untamed Domain's run in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile was really good. The comeback race was you could give an excuse there, one that you would want to consider. But I keep falling on River Boyne, the horse for Jeff Mullins with Flavian Pratt. Obviously, it's a West Coast horse coming east to run against some of these horses on the turf, and we don't usually like to back those types. But I think this one might be pretty good. And Jeff Mullins brought a pretty nice turf horse to Kentucky. Didn't do so well this year, but last year, and it's in the post. I think River Boyne is nice. I think that horse could be tough in this spot. Just depends on what kind of ground we get. I think this is a really wide open race, though. There's really no standouts. They all kind of seem to be running around the same figures. And I'll be interested to hear what you've heard, Pete, from your pro punter friends on the over the pond about 3 and 4 pence.
The 3 and 4 pence looks very interesting. I think you mentioned two of the contenders. Untamed Domain, really interesting to me because I do feel like there's big excuses for the difference in surfaces with the dirt last time and the DRF the time before that at Gulfstream. I think this is more the game. I could imagine Graham Motion circling this race on the calendar the day after the failed dirt experiment. And, he's one of those guys like Bill Mott with a target. Extra dangerous. Maybe the darkened recent form means the price is better than that 5-1 in the morning line. Maybe not, but it's certainly a horse I'm going to be considering. 3 and 4 pence. Another horse who you is a little hard to evaluate simply because of the surface stuff. Dirt last time, wax the time before that. The run in the Patent Stakes, though, very good. Obviously, incredibly flattered by Mendelssohn. The Dewhurst has worked out to be a pretty good race. Obviously, Mendelssohn holding up that form. U.S. Navy flag did not come back to win, but it was soft turf and he had an excuse. 3 and 4 pence looks to me like a horse who can finish, who should definitely be used. More of, Mike, what you call in the book like a wild card type. I don't really know. Not a horse I'm going to key, but whoever let's say my key in here was Untamed Domain, I'd want a little 3 and 4 pence over Untamed Domain. And I ain't letting 3 and 4 pence knock me out of the picks either. Mike, what did you think about this race?
That's kind of freaky, Pete, because I have wild card question mark beside 3 and 4 pence. That's a little scary.
We spent all that time together. It's logical, I guess.
Yeah. I used to say that was my psychiatry session for the week, was talking to you for the book. I miss that. We may have to get that back together. I think the obvious horses are in the must uses are 3 and 4 pence and Rushing Fall if she decides to go in this spot. But I have a value horse in this race, Tiger's Rule. The last time the horse started, it was a completely screwed up trip where you just basically have to throw it out. Rosario is a top notch rider, but once in a while he throws these off the wall rides that drive me crazy. I think maybe he could be DeSormo's long lost cousin or something. But the last start, the Tiger's Rule just got completely wiped out at the top of the stretch. My notes say that he still finished up okay. He's hasn't run a number that would win this race yet for sure, but he is a slowly improving 3-year-old that I think still has upside. No one I would rather see on him at Churchill Downs than Corey Lannery. And I just think this horse is going to outrun its odds. Even the Vicky Foley angle, she's won one race this year, but her horses tend to outperform at Churchill Downs. So I see a lot of factors that are coming together to make me think that Tiger's Rule will show up in the number somewhere.
I want to make sure I toss out one more other horse I think is interesting, and that's the 9 Captivating Moon. I don't know. Mike and I hadn't actually talked about it, but it felt like the inside of the turf course was good at Keeneland throughout a majority of the meet. I think a lot of people said, the speed was holding, but I'm more of a believer in the past, and speed horses just happen to be down on the inside more often than on the outside. I thought the inside was good the last few weeks, or three weeks of the meet, and I thought Captivating Moon was wide coming home against Analyze, and I think he could be a little bit dangerous with Florent Giroux.
Did you have that note on the Keeneland turf, Mike, or did you notice that tendency of the inside?
There were days I'm sorry, Pete. There were days I thought it was speed favoring, and there were days I thought it was rail favoring. This particular day, April 6th, when the Transylvania Stakes was run, I had it inside favoring, like Jonathan's saying.
All right, makes sense. Another interesting contender. It's a race where you could really spread around, as we learned last year, getting bit by our friend Elliot's horse Arklow. The picture. Did you take the Arklow picture with you, JK, or is that still hanging in your war room at home?
No, I did it like Notre Dame does. I just hit it on the way out.
All right, Pat Day Mile is up next. A lot of ways to go in here. For me, there was a standout, and that standout is Mask, a horse we've spent some time talking about on the DRF Players podcast. Do you think I'm nuts, Mike, to want to put a majority of my play through this Chad Brown training?
Well, I can't tell how good Mask is going to be, Pete. He may be, worthy of your keying him in this race, but I can't. And the reason is I thought that was a soft pace that he took advantage of in his last start. He still finished very well. He did what he was supposed to do when given that slow pace, but this is a wide open, very tough race. So, I can't go there. They definitely include, for me, the horse I'm most interested in is Mississippi. Had notes on this horse in the Florida Derby. He moved into that fast pace and actually went up and hooked the lead late on the turn, and then kind of flattened out, which he had every right to do. I think the horse is very live. The other horses that I'm interested in, Madison's Luna. This is not usually my type of horse. Only 2 sprints and then trying to go into the mile race here, but I've just been totally impressed with him. I think he could be any kind of horse. And as the son of Tappet, you think maybe he'll even improve at the mile here. So he's a horse that I have to include. Also, Gravitos, little light on numbers for me, but I thought maybe was rushed a little in his last race, the Lexington Stakes. The pace was slightly above average for me there. He was pushed into the pace, came up a little short in the lane. I'm thinking this slight cutback might be good for him, and I would not worry about that 14 pole, because I think breaking in the chute at Churchill and the kind of tactical speed that he has, I picture him working out a really good trip on the outside, using just enough to get like a striking position, 2 or 3 lengths off the lead on the turn. The other horses I might just mention quickly would be Restoring Hope. I think he's a must include in there, and of course your Mask. You can't tell how good he is, and it's a fool's errand to throw out Chad Brown in these type of races with young, improving horses.
JK, how do you see this one?
I think this is tough too. I mean, going through this, I don't know if I'm going to be able to try to have a cheap cold cock on this pick six. It looks tough. I think National Flag is going to be it's going to have a tough trip from down in there. I mean, the horse ran better last time than I expected him to run. But like Mike said, the one spot from the chute's not ideal. That could be a little tough for him. He's going to kind of have his hand forced. I pretty much agree with all the other horses. It feels very spready to me, but I think Restoring Hope is interesting. Obviously, I made a last-minute decision in the Wood Memorial to get off of him, hearing a Baffert interview, thinking that he was going to run the horse in the 7/8 race. I believe it's called the Bayshore on Wood Memorial undercard, and ended up running him here just to give him a shot. Now he's cutting him back, adding blinkers. The horse has shown some speed, has got some good numbers, and I think that he could be one that could be dangerous. Baffert sprinting or one turning on the dirt is one that always gets your attention. I think you got to spread around here. I don't trust Mask either, but I see myself using quite a few: Restoring Hope, Mask, Madison's Luna, Mississippi, and maybe trying to get brave by fading National Flag. That's where the value is.
All right, we'll talk later about maybe getting some head-to-head going, JK, with Mask in here. One point I want to make about this race before we move on, and this I'm just stealing an observation from our mutual friend, Sean Borman. He mentioned that race could be an interesting litmus test for the Derby for two reasons. For one thing, just to see how Aidan O'Brien does with the shipper Seahenge, who doesn't look great by any means, but this is not one of those bred for turf Aidan O'Briens who shouldn't be able to stand up on dirt. This is a scat daddy, Kentucky bred, who I think it might give a little bit more confidence regarding Mendelssohn if Seahenge were to able to even say run in the top half of the field and show a little bit of form here. And then Mississippi coming back gives us a chance to get a line on the Florida Derby form, which of course will come into play when we talk about the big one in 2 races time. But before we get to that big one, we're going to talk about this big one. It's the Turf Classic, JK. Your best friend isn't here, but there's some other old friends. Did you land on one of them, or do you have something clever?
I'm gonna be betting the 11 horse Divisadero. So there's no. I'm just joking. There's only 10 in here. You know what? This is an interesting race. I would love Yoshida if I ran by and I saw Jose Ortiz and I said, "Hey, Jose, are you gonna ride Yoshida like you rode him when you broke his maiden at Keeneland, wire to wire?" There's not a lot of pace in here. I think he could be extremely tough if he was kind of put into the race, but I'm a little bit concerned. I think this is probably a prep for a supposed trip to Ascot. So I'll use Yoshida a little bit, but a little bit nervous. Beach Patrol obviously looks great. The horse that catching my attention is Camelot Kitten. Obviously, I have a little bit of a affinity for him being a full brother to Bobby's Kitten, but I thought he ran well last time for Maker. And it was the second time for Maker, and he ran well in that synthetic stakes. We know what Maker can do in these 2-turn grass races, and I think he could be a little sneaky. And if I'm not mistaken, he won a race here at Churchill in the past as a younger horse. Yeah, he did. He won the American Turf back in I think that was 2016. So Camelot Kitten's a little bit interesting to me, but obviously you got to use Beach Patrol and Yoshida.
Yeah, Yoshida for me would be, I think you're probably right. It's probably not the day for Yoshida, but for guys like us who've been talking about Yoshida since his first race, I'm okay, Mike. Maybe you could tell me if you think this is too muggish, but in terms of betting strategy, but I'll sometimes find a few dollars to put on as, just insurance, mental health insurance with a horse like Yoshida in a spot like this. But I'd want to run most of my play, vast majority of my play, more than Mask in the previous race. I'd want to run most of my play through Beach Patrol in here. What do you think of that insurance concept for a horse you've always touted and liked? And what do you think of this race?
Well, Beach Patrol he's a really cool horse, Pete. He's made of iron. He always shows up. He's just very determined in the lane. He's a horse that it's easy to fall in love with. My approach to this race is going to be, I will have seen a couple of turf races by then, and I want to see how the track's playing. It's often than not, if we get 4 days of run, that turf course at Churchill will show somebody, and it could be anything. I have no more idea than you do, but it could be inside favoring, it could be outside favoring. I've seen it be, I've seen it be close. So I don't really know what the bias is going to be, but I think you need very light on your feet. By this time in the day, you should know what the bias is. And I think this race sets up to kind of take advantage of that. If it is leaning any at all toward the inside, then Deauville would be the horse for me to key around. And the reason being, I think he's going to get that perfect European pocket trip here. So if you can run on the inside, and if it's an advantage, then I think he's can't miss being 1 or 2. If it's an honest track, I still think he's possibly the second best horse behind Beach Patrol. So if it's an honest track, I'm thinking Deauville and Beach Patrol, and I kind of like Krylov third best in there, and this race would set up to me maybe to take a few swings on a cold try or some kind of super play, especially if there's a little bias that could give you a possible edge.
I like it. All right, we've got a good amount of time here to do the Derby, to take some questions. We did have a few interesting ones come in, and also to hopefully get to our tale from the track from you, Mike. We'll just do the Derby. Some years we've gone through horse by horse. I don't think we're going to do that. We've got a lot of content going through each individual runner. He was able to do a webinar last night with Jay Privman and Craig Milkowski where we went through the entire field. If folks are looking for that type of analysis, it's all over drf.com/YouTube. I think we'll just have a little bit more of an in-depth discussion of this race with some follow-ups and some back and forth. JK, now's the time, your official Kentucky Derby selection for 2018.
Let me grab this. Hold on one second. Get this wig. This wig situated first of all.
You're picking Solimini here?
No, I used my first toss, actually. Look, I think Justify is going to get a great trip. I think he's going to sit right off of Restoring Hope. I don't care if there's 18 horses in the field other than those two or 7 horses in the field. He's not going to see them. He'll be sitting second, third, 2 or 3 wide. The only issue is if he moves too soon or it's going to be a rider error at that point. And who do you want more in that position than Mike? There's no way they're going to take this horse back and try to save ground he's not going to get into trouble because he's going to be forward out of there, and you just got to be good enough. So, and I think he is. I think he will be what he's done already at this point with the figures and so quickly. He looks magnificent, and if I can tell the difference between them, then they must look really good. So it's going to be Justify for me.
You misspoke when you were talking about the pace horse. I assume you meant Promises Fulfilled?
Who did I say?
I think you said Restoring Hope.
I sure did, yeah. Promises Fulfilled, my bad. Yeah, sorry about that.
No, just checking to see if it was a different, not just trying to call you on your mistake there, just trying to make sure you didn't have some other idea about how this pace is going to go. Are you worried at all, JK? This is a horse who didn't really break with alacrity in the first 2 starts. Broke better last time. I just worry that from the 7, I feel like I'll be way, way more confident betting this horse a few strides out of the gate even. But I am a little worried that if it goes wrong for him, I'm less worried about rider error. I'm more worried about what's going to happen in the early stages of the race when it comes to Justify's chances. Can you assuage that fear at all?
It's always a concern, right? I think that when you have a guy like Mike Smith who's sat on him those last 2 times, obviously knows that there was an issue there, so he'll be aware, and I'm sure he's got a lot of tricks in his bag to make sure that doesn't happen. Bob Baffert obviously was aware and has had 6 to 8 works to in schooling sessions to try to get it rectified. And then, if he's off just a couple of steps slow, I still feel like he's going to, there's not a ton of speed like right outside of him. So it feels like he still can, Lone Sailor, Hofburg, My Boy Jack are all going to take back. So he's got a little bit of time to kind of react and get to where he needs to be. He's not going to be forced or squeezed or pinched. So I still feel like he'll get out of there just fine. And it's his fourth start, right? He's still learning. So I would hope that it's starting to click for him.
Excellent points, all. Mike, how about you? I'll ask it this way. Are you prepared to give an official Derby selection at this point, or do you want to more just speak about the race generally in terms of ones you might use, press, etc.?
No, I'm ready to step out, Pete.
Let's do it.
I think it's all Santa Anita Derby. I like Justify the best, and I think Bolt Doro is great value, and if Justify doesn't win, I expect him to. I'm going to make a kill bet with Justify over Bolt Doro. I'm going to flip the exacta. I will be trying to get picks live to both of them. And if Bolt Doro is 6-1 or better, I'll be making a win bet on him. That's something I want to touch on. If this works for you, I might touch on a little something about several of these horses. Justify, I'm going to play. I'm still working on this, but maybe 10%, even though he's my top pick, maybe 10% of my money without Justify. And my thinking is he's been a little bit of a slow breaker, not terrible, but he's just, he doesn't seem like a real athletic breaker. So in the Derby, that can be death. If you break, he's been out slow 1 a couple times for me. If you're out slow 2 in the Derby, or out slow even 1.5, and the horse next to you comes over and leans on you, that your opportunity to get near the front can be taken away in 4 or 5 strides. So, and it's just racing luck. So I don't expect that to happen, but I could, I wouldn't be shocked if it did. So, I want to have 10% of my money as an insurance policy against that occurrence. Bolt Doro, I just, I don't see a lot of risk with him not firing. My biggest risk there is, I'm not a huge Southern Cal player. I don't know all the fine points of Mick Ruiz's training career. I think the biggest risk with Bolt Doro is just that the trainer, although he may be a very capable trainer, is just that he hasn't been in that situation before. I like the moves I see him making. I like the way he's training the horse. I like the way he's been handled and managed. So I don't see any reason to overemphasize the trainer angle, but still that is my biggest concern. As far as the horse, I think I think it's a really good situation for the Derby. You're getting a horse in Bolt Doro that's a proven top-class horse. He's run the numbers, and he's extremely versatile, which is very important in the Derby. You get jostled around. You can be 3 or 4 lengths further back than you expected to be just because of racing luck and the way things shake out at the break. Bolt Doro should be better prepared than practically any horse in the race to overcome an issue like that, because he can go near the front if he needs to. He can close from off the pace if he needs to. And he just seems like a tough horse that almost always shows up. So I feel very comfortable betting him and keying him in the Derby. I think I'm expecting him to get a lot of play. He's 8-1 on the morning line. I've heard talk about 8 to 10 to 1, even 12 to 1 with him. I don't think that's going to happen. I think, and every day I go to the races, horses make a lot of sense, and they're bet down below what you think they're going to be bet. I think that happens even in the Derby. So I think he catches a lot of money and goes off below his morning line, but I still think at 6 to 1, he's good value.
And he's available 11 to 1 now in some of the international markets. I have a couple of follow-ups about the Santa Anita Derby. Yes. One for each of you guys. I'll start with a question for JK, which is, I've sort of constructed this little bit of a pro Bolt Doro narrative regarding the Santa Anita Derby. And then, Mike, I was going to have a question for you specifically about the pace of the Santa Anita Derby. But my question for you, JK, it almost looked to me, Bolt d'Oro broke visually better to me in the Santa Anita Derby. And it almost looked like consciously Castellano, who was aboard that day, chose to just not let him use speed, let the others go, justify. In my mind, it was almost like, you know what? We don't need to fire down hammer and tongs with this horse the whole way around and make it so we've had two really grueling races in our three-year-old year. Maybe we'll just let him go, even though it's not the best strategy to win the race today. Let him take some runs at him, let him run through the lane and set him up so maybe he can peak in his third race of the form cycle instead of peaking a race early like he did in his 2-year-old campaign in the front runner. And that, by that theory, that would put him much closer to justify than the current odds suggest and what many people think. Do you buy that argument? I recognize it's pure narrative and may have nothing to it, but I'm just curious to get your thoughts, JK, on that specific concept and also your thoughts on Bolt d'Oro in general.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I buy the argument. It's hard for me to subscribe to it. I literally do not let my son beat me in cornhole. Like I don't. If I'm playing, I'm trying to win. So I don't care if you're I don't care if you're 6 or if you're 78. If you show up, you line up across from me, I'm going to try to beat you. So the idea of getting in a race and not really trying to win it is a little bit tricky, but it does make sense. I agree. They might have wanted to teach Bolt a couple of lessons and then also try to reserve a little bit for the first Saturday in May. Obviously, a win in the Santa Anita Derby is important. Guys, grade ones are. This would obviously be the one that really propel him. So I can understand that. I'm a believer as well. I believe in Bolt d'Oro. He's a that will kind of be, justifies a done horse for me. Bolt d'Oro, one of the A horses to be using and trying to build some stuff around. I want to be alive too in picks. One of my favorite things, and it's a little bit crazy, is I want to have a lot of single situations to justify, because a lot of people are saying, they want 5-2 on a horse like that. Well, 5 American Pharoah I can say that was value. So I want to try to in these multi-race bets where everyone's using 4 or 5 horses because it's the Derby. I want to try to be alive to just one really good in a Mike Maloney way, a kill bet, and then I want to have some more conservative kind of catch modes to horses like Good Magic and Bolt d'Oro. So I'm a Bolt d'Oro guy. I do want to get Mike's take on one of the things that Paul said yesterday, and Paul said that in all his years of doing figures that the Santa Anita Derby that was run this year is the slowest paced Santa Anita Derby that he's ever done, not counting the polytrack error. And I guess my question is that, yeah, that's not great, I guess, for Justify, or is it great for Justify considering that it was the slowest paced race, but it still came back with that really attractive triple digit buyer? What does that tell you about how fast he came home?
And that actually, I'll just piggyback, because my question for Mike was going to be basically about, he obviously loves the Santa Anita Derby. To me, because of what was visually a slow pace, and a lot of figure makers have come back slow, when we were talking about Mask in the previous race, it seemed like being able to control a slow pace made you a little bit skeptical about whether or not Mask was really as good as those numbers. I was curious why, in this instance, you're more confident about the form of the Santa Anita Derby. Did you have the pace faster, or is there some other element at play? So a couple of questions for you about the pace, Mike.
No, the pace was definitely slow, Pete. And the difference between these horses and Mask to me is these horses have proven in previous races to me that they can run the number that it takes in here. So Mask, that was his only race at a mile, I think, and I still have questions about him because I haven't seen him in that situation in an honestly paced race. So that's the difference to me. I'm a guy that doesn't look to bet horses like Justify that got soft leads on, in slow paces and got to dance on the front end. That's not the way to make it as a professional horse player, and I understand that. But in this scenario, I believe Justify, if everybody runs their A race, I think Justify wins. And I think it's an advantage in a race as grueling as the Derby that Justify and Bolt Doro didn't have to deal with 46 and change half in the Santa Anita Derby, that, they were able to show their finish, but it wasn't a race that should knock them out. I expect them to move forward off that race, even though they both got nice setups. So and I know exactly what other handicappers are saying, and I felt that way when I first started thinking about these horses. But I would much rather bet a horse that closed in the Santa Anita Derby and gained ground in the stretch and ran a huge late pace number, but that horse doesn't exist. So I'm comfortable thinking that the Santa Anita Derby was clearly the best prep, and that these horses were clearly the best two horses in that prep, and that although they both got very comfortable trips in a very comfortable pace, that I expect them to still move forward a little off that race, because I don't think it took a lot out of them.
It's time for me to give my selection here, and I'm not going to take issues too strong, but I'll just suggest, Mike, when you say that if they all run their A race, Justify wins, the only horse that I could possibly put up against him to run his A race and beat him is Mendelssohn. The run in the UAE Derby, I get it. It was bias-aided, but as Paul Matisse said on the show yesterday, and I think he said it very well, even if it's a dead rail there, he wins easily. This is a horse who's run on 2 continents, 3 different surfaces, 3 different running styles. He's run fast early. He's run fast late. He's done both at the same time. He's got the pedigree. He's run. The buyer came back 106. Other figure makers we talked about, it seemed like Paul was leaning this way, though he didn't say specifically in our conversation yesterday, had that number higher, in some instances, quite a bit higher. I think Mendelssohn, if he can get away from there, and it seems like he breaks sharper, and they've done more gate work with him than the typical Aidan O'Brien horses that come over here, who all seem to have Outslow 1 next to their name. Where he's drawn, the talent he's shown, the hands he's in. I mean, I think I'm getting to a point where I've got him pretty much equal with Justify. I get it. Maybe Justify, the hands he's in and the success Baffert's had and how much you can trust him. Maybe he's more likely overall to hit the board. But I feel like if they show their A races, you can toss a coin. And my gut, especially with all the love for Justify, makes me feel good about putting up Mendelssohn as my official 2018 Kentucky Derby pick. JK, will he be one of the horses on your backup tickets, or are you in this camp of folks who's against Mendelssohn?
He's kind of like B-ish for me. I mean, I respect the horse. He's obviously probably worth more than any other horse in this field. That's for sure.
For sure.
Yeah. The thing about it is I've heard a couple of people say it. Had a conversation. I just want to give credit, like with Craig Bernick, and then obviously Paul's points. Craig had the thought of like, look, he either has to be forward to stay clear, and then he's going too fast, or he has to take back and eat dirt, and he's not going to like that either. Paul made the great point that he's going to be, that they don't want to be 3 or 4 wide, so they're going to probably have to go forward. So now he's going to go quick. He's going to sit 3 off of where Justify is, then he's going to move into Justify and be able to put Justify away and then hold off the closers. That's the only part I'm having trouble with.
I think he's going to get a similar trip to Justify. 3 back, 3 behind him. I think they'd want to be. I think they'd probably want to be a little bit closer. But I just trust these guys, and we've seen before the way that his horses can finish. I don't have an issue with the trip. It's not as clear cut as what Justify's trip's going to be. Mike, where do you stand with Mendelssohn? Will he be on your tickets at all?
He won't be on my horizontal tickets, Pete. That'll only be Justify and Bolt Doro. But inside the race in my vertical betting, I will use him on top, and he would be one of the only a couple that I will use on top besides my two picks. The reason for that may sound counterintuitive, but the reason for that is if Justify and Bolt Doro run second and third, it doesn't cost much for me to bet a small try-saver, saving myself against Mendelssohn. Here's something about Mendelssohn that I haven't heard anyone else mention. Maybe they have, but I apologize if they have. Some of the horsemen that I speak with talk about how Mendelssohn is always yelling every time he comes into the paddock.
Yes, he makes a lot of noise. He makes a lot of noise.
Yes.
He's doing it this morning again.
Yes, and that tells me he's and I'm not a horse whisperer, but what the horsemen tell me is he's a high-strung horse that pays a lot of attention to his surroundings. In the Derby, I don't have to go into what the surroundings are like for the horse and what that wall of sound is like when you hit the racetrack or when you turn into the stretch. So that is a concern to me. I voiced my concerns about my two picks. My concerns about Mendelssohn mentally in the Derby are much greater than the concerns that I voiced about my two picks. So yes, I agree that Mendelssohn has the talent and the ability to win the Kentucky Derby. At the price he will be, I tend to think fade here for me, but I will make the race play to try to protect myself for a small amount of money against him winning.
That's logical with that view. Let's do a speed round. I'll just have a bunch of questions, quick answers. I'll ask some of them. I'll ask to both of you. Some I'll ask to one or the other. This one's just for JK because this is a horse we've talked about a bunch on the show. Any love left for Combatant?
Yeah, a little bit. It feels like he's kind of one of those mile and a 16th, mile and an eighth closers that tricks you into thinking that he wants more ground. He's definitely one that I would consider using underneath. I wouldn't get beat by him, but I think his win chances are probably very slim.
Mike, you've sort of hinted at the answer to this question, but it's a good one that came in with our friend from the Ring Bet, Matt Scarlatta. And he's talking about the difference between horses like Good Magic and Bolt Doro who are cycling up into form. Would you rather have a horse like that, or would you rather have a horse who's shown the natural brilliance that Justify, Magnum Moon, and Mendelssohn have shown to this point? They're so much more lightly raced. Which model feels better to you for winning the Derby in 2018?
Well, I tend to horse that's cycling up because I think you get better value with that type horse that hasn't done it yet versus a horse that has already done it, maybe. But in this particular Derby, I respect Good Magic, and I doubly respect Chad Brown. I just think the horse, in my figures, I trust my analysis of Keeneland Racing, and my analysis of the Bluegrass was that he ran well. He will move forward coming out of there, but he's just not fast to win.
Here's a bias question. We'll send this one right to you, Mike. Other than the Dubai races, in your handicapping of the key Kentucky Derby preps, did you notice any important biases that you're looking to use in your handicapping?
No, I really didn't. I thought Bluegrass Day, the inside, helped just a little bit. I didn't notice any strong biases. I thought Florida Derby track was very even, so much less than usual, I would say. I would say the only one to mention, and everybody knows this one, is the UAE Derby was a golden rail of all golden rails.
All right, here's one about the Super, JK. So we'll piggyback on your the bet you're going to give to your dad and his friends. This is a listener, David, who has a budget of $800 for the Derby Super. Any suggestions on how to structure the bet? Would you ever hit all for the third and fourth spots?
The word budget and all are like counterintuitive, so I would never hit the all button. If you're hitting the all button in the fourth leg of the superfecta, then you should just be playing the try because you don't have a strong opinion. if you feel like you need all 19, all 20 of them there or whatever it is. And I think what you want to do is you probably want to try to find maybe 2 horses to win. And you probably want to, go, and I don't have a calculator in front of me, so forgive me if the math is a little shady.
JK tries math fails. You don't want to go there? I've got,
No.
I am literally holding a calculator in my hand. So if you want me to do some math for you, I can.
Well, I'm just thinking, I think maybe you'd want to do like a 2x4 by 8x8 maybe, and then reverse the 4 and the 2. So go a 4x2 by 8x8. Something along those lines. I don't know what the total is on that, but if I was going to play it, it would be somewhere I would start there with the math and see if I can maybe add a horse or if I'd have to drop one. But I'd try to hone in on the exacta, trying to hit the exacta with your 2 horses that you like the most, and needing one of them to run in the exacta. If you can't pick 2 horses to run in the exacta, you might not deserve to hit the super, or you're going to have to get a bigger budget. So. That's kind of how I would look at it.
I think that's a $252 bet if my math, if PTF can try
and
math.
That's both ways when you do it, when you front and the front half of it?
No, that'll be one way. So 500 for both. Let me, JK, while you prepare your stocks, I'm going to go to Mike and basically just ask him the same question. Is the Derby, well, we'll do it this way. Is the Derby Super a bet that you play? And do you have a specific approach to it that you might try to employ this time around?
Oh yeah, it's a bet that I love, Pete. Yeah, I'm gonna hope that Justify and Bolt Doro fill out 2 of the top 3 slots, and then I will be using Mendelssohn, Good Magic, Audible, horses like that, to fill in those slots. And then what I will really be focusing on is, my value closers or my value underneath horses, who I have 3 of those this year. The top one on that list is Free Drop Billy. And a lot of reasons I like him. He didn't get the trips in the bluegrass. Didn't run much of a number, but he had an excuse, and I think he'll move forward. I think his breeding is dynamite for the 1.25 miles. He's a horse that I'm confident will stay, and the Dale Romans angle doesn't hurt. So I look for him to have a great chance to pick up a piece at a big price. Combatant, I say JK, don't give up in the 4th slot yet. He had no chance with the pace scenario in the Arkansas Derby. So, and I love Asmussen is proven, like with looking at Lee last year, that he's eligible to have a horse improve and close on Derby Day. I think you have to use him. The other horse is a horse that I don't particularly like the form on, My Boy Jack, but I think he will be probably last by himself. And, there can be perfect trips on the front end, and there can be perfect trips on the back end. And I'm kind of like, I designed the race seeing My Boy Jack getting the perfect loser's trip. So I think it's important. And I took a shot at him earlier, but he, that would be a good fit for him. Derby proven rider, and a guy that could sit back and make one run like that and would know how to put that into effect in the best way. So those 3 horses, I think, are live underneath at big prices.
JK, your Derby Super.
All right, so I've got 9 horses because you're gonna have to take one of them and toss them away. So I'll give you that kind of the last play situation. Free Drop Billy is the 2 horse, the first one. I think that he's going to come running late. I've talked about Romans in this race for a while. Good Magic, trending upward. Like I said, when I come and look at these horses run or I watch the workouts, I can only tell the real glaring things. One thing I can tell you is Good Magic looks good, and he was galloping like a possessed horse this morning, and he has been apparently. So the 6, the 7 Justify, the 8 Lone Sailor. I think that horse could pick up some pieces, saving ground. You'd imagine that he'll tuck in there a little bit and make one run. So Lone Sailor's been working well. That 57 workout, I think he'll come running late. Paul Matisse endorsed as well. The 11 Bolt Doro for all the reasons we've discussed. The 14 Mendelssohn, and the 18, Vino Rosso. And you'll notice I don't have any Todds in here because I think all the Todds are going to try to win. And I think that in this race, when you're not good enough, if you try to win, then you have a really good shot of running out. If you aren't good enough and you take back a run, maybe run fourth or third, then I think you have a better shot. I think all of the Todds are going to try to win. I think Vino Rosso will run all day, and I think he could just kind of get that 3 or 4 wide trip all the way around there and just kind of stick around for fourth. I don't see him getting any higher than third. And then the last spot, I'll leave it up to the listeners to try to decipher between My Boy Jack, the 10 horse, and the 20 combatant. My Boy Jack is one that I believe, like Mike said, that I think that Kent's going to take that horse back to last, make one run, and pick up a piece. And I'm hopeful of that. He's obviously fit, running 3 weeks ago in the Lexington. He's run quite a bit, so fitness isn't going to be an issue for him. So I think that he could be dangerous. And then combatant, I'm still struggling to figure out if he's a mile and an eighth closer or if he's going to still have that same kick going a mile and a quarter. He was closing into that slow pace for all the reasons I don't like Magnum Moon. You kind of have to upgrade combatant.
I feel bad. That's the first call that Magnum Moon has gotten on this whole show. He seems like the anti-hype horse of the week. I don't think that we need to go into too much detail unless Mike, unless you have something positive to say about Magnum Moon.
I do not.
JK. I actually I got one thing, and being on the backside, you're running into trainers and horse people, right? A lot of horse people, not a lot of handicappers, but horse people. I have not heard anyone say that Magnum Moon is anything less than stunning physically. So if you're one of those people that's interested in that, then there's your little tidbit to feel better about the situation. I just can't play a horse that isn't, I know we're doing it with Justify, who's in a slow pace race, but isn't running fast numbers to accompany that slow pace race.
Yeah, and lugging out. I mean, I guess they say he shied from the gate or whatever, but it just didn't look like the Derby winner's prep to me. Okay, so JK, normally you give out a super box. It sounds to me like, with your opinion, much better idea this year. Key Justify throughout the super, play with those other horses. Am I right?
Yeah, definitely. It's you don't want to waste when you can find a horse that's going to run in. It's ridiculous to play a bunch of combinations with him out, because that's essentially what you do if you box 8 horses. You're playing a ton of combinations with Justify out or Bolt Doro out, and so I'm going to probably recommend to my dad and the guys at Grubbs Infinity in Dallas to key him in every spot. Hopefully that doesn't blow my dad's head up when I tell him, "Hey, Dad, I want you to key him in every spot," and he'll be calling me, blowing me up from Lone Star, trying to figure out how to do that. And I'll be like, Dad, you're embarrassing me. Get it together. So,
love it.
Yeah, so I think that's probably where we'll go in that situation is save a little bit of money, maybe try to have it for $2 and try to get a little bit more efficient than an 8-horse box.
One more question for you, JK, and it's a hard one to answer quickly, but I'm going to make you answer it quickly because then we're going to give the floor to Mike to bring us home with the story of his first Kentucky Derby. But I have to ask, you've been asked it by several people, your approach to the pick 6 this year. Did you do the pick 6 on out of the gate? Can people just check it out there? That would be the easiest answer. I have a bunch more Derby thoughts you can check out on out of the gate. Oaks thoughts too. You want to see those programs I went through, and based on knowledge I got from Mike and working on betting with an edge with him, drew up some bets folks can check out. I'm not going to double up and go through it here, but your general pick 6 thoughts, JK.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. It's going to be very spready. It's obviously going to probably have to be a group situation. I don't think I'll be able to tackle it on my own. What I'll probably do is try to get a live 70% of my tickets ice cold to Justify, and probably 30% of my tickets to Bolt Doro, and then, or maybe 15 or 20% to Bolt Doro, and then do some little saver stuff on some of the wilder types. And then I think in the Churchill Downs, I'm going to try to narrow it a little bit with Imperial Hint, but the rest of them are going to be spreads. We talked about a lot of the horses. I mean, I'm thinking I'm going to need 5 in the Distaff Mile with, obviously focusing a little bit on Dream a While. I'm going to need, like I said, Imperial Hint. I'm going to try to get cute there. But if Awesome Slew runs there, then that race becomes a race where you need a couple of horses. The American Turf is tough. I think you're going to need 5 or 6 horses. And then I think you could probably try to get a little bit cute with Beach Patrol, but I'm a little bit nervous about Krylov and also with Yoshida. It's going to be a spready situation. So we'll see. It might honestly be one. It's one of the lessons I've had to teach myself is As you got to take what the defense gives you. And if it's a situation where the pick six is too rich for me this year, I don't have a strong enough opinion. You'll see me playing around in the 50-cent pick five.
I was going to say, it sounds to me like a certainty you should be playing the pick five and be able to play it more efficiently. I'll just let you talk to your early thoughts on verticals, Mike, and how aggressive you think you might be. Is the pick six something you might look at, the pick five, or would you probably keep it simpler than that?
It seemed like I had a few opinions this year on the, at first glance on the Derby card. So I'll be looking at a pick six this year. And I in the Derby, I would be playing two. I would be playing Justified Boldoro. I like JK's thought of awesome hint, or drawing a blank on his
Imperial
name.
Hint.
The Imperial Hint. Thanks. I like him as a potential single, or at least to run 80 or 90% of your money through him. So in some of the other races look like, they narrow down enough to where it would be possible to get a ticket together. One thing real quick for the fans out there, on Derby Day, it's easy to try to go overboard and try to make a bunch of hard decisions and try to win the moon. What I keep telling myself on Derby Day, you don't have to do anything incredible sometimes to make a nice score. On Derby Day, if you cash tickets, you're generally going to have a good day. So I try to be a little more inclusive than I am normally, and I try not to split quite so many hairs. That horse that you only want to use in third, maybe you put him in second for some amount, because when, if he slips in second at 30-1, that might make your whole weekend. So just a few thoughts that I'm going to try to put into effect this weekend.
I love it, and I'll second it. Pick threes on Derby Day historically have been great to me, and paid overlays, and been significant scores, like you say, Mike, without splitting atoms. Okay, the book is Betting with an Edge. You can buy it in the DRF store. You can buy it on Amazon. You can tweet me at Looms Boldly if you're looking for a signed copy of the book. One of the things that's great about the book, Mike brings not only handicapping insight and betting insight, but there's also a bunch of great stories. One of those stories is about his first time at the Derby, and he's going to tell us the abridged version of it now.
Okay. When I was 16 or 17, my dad woke me up early one Derby morning asking would I like to go to the Derby. If you're a teenage boy that loves racing and you're growing up in Lexington, Kentucky, obviously the answer to that is yes. So we jumped in the truck and drove up I-64 toward Louisville. When we got to Louisville, we tried to find a place to park. We're operating on a budget, and Dad interviewed a few of the locals there that were in the cottage industry in Louisville, of the neighbors to Churchill Downs that park you in their yard for whatever the market will bear. He found a guy that was a couple dollars cheaper than the others, and we pulled in to park, and it's very early. The guy pulls us in next to a chain link fence. Dad voices concerns about perhaps getting blocked in. The guy says, don't worry about it. I'm leaving this aisle open right in front of you. You'll be good. That's the perfect spot. Dad pays the guy, and we start our walk over to Churchill. We go in general admission. It was around $20 a piece, I think, at that time. Don't have seats or anything like that. So we stand on the ground level of the grandstand, on the bricks, as we called it then, and got ready for the first race. And it was then that I learned the reason for the last minute decision to come to the Derby was that there was a horse in the second race that Dad was in love with. It had a terrible last race. When I opened the form and looked, it had gotten beat 20 some lengths in its last start. Dad says, don't worry about it. This trainer does that every year, either Oaks or Derby Day. He runs a long shot that has terrible paper, and they run tremendous at big prices. He said, I watched this horse's last race at Keeneland. It was a complete stiff job. This horse is going to win today. So true to Dad's style, my dad was an over-aggressive bettor. He believed it was beneath his manhood to back up a bet. He bet it just exactly like he saw it, and lived or died with the consequences. And he took half of the money that he had with him to gamble that day and bet it in doubles, linking up 3 or 4 horses in the first race with his long shot in the second. He misses the first race. He's upset, but he still has the half the money left to bet on the horse that he likes. He goes up early, bets the rest of what he has to win on the long shot horse in the second, comes back. We get under the television screen. The horse is 30-1. About a minute to post, the horse drops to 20-1. And then as they're loading the last flash, we see the long shot horse drops to 12-1. And Dad says loud enough for anybody around to hear, that's it. I knew this was a betting coup. That there comes their money. We're going to win this race. The race starts, and Dad's horse is in a decent spot. It's toward the back of the pack, but it's a 12-horse field, going like 7/8 of a mile, as I remember. And he's in a congested spot, but he's traveling like very, very well. But when they get to the top of the stretch, Dad's horse is still, just sitting in the pocket waiting. The horses in front of him start to tire. He has horses on his inside, horses on his outside, nowhere to go. By the 8th pole, all the other horses are whipping and driving, and Dad's horse is locked in behind the leaders with absolutely dying to run and nowhere to go. He tried for a seam outside. He tried for a seam inside. He couldn't find anything. Just before the wire, a little gap opens up, and the horse just explodes through this gap, and he's finishing with a burst, but he comes up a neck short. Dad goes ballistic. He's screaming, cursing the rider. Everybody in the place is looking at us. He wants to go charge the jockey's room and whip this jockey's A. And I'm like holding on to his elbow. I don't really know how serious he is, but he's an ex-boxer, kind of a tough guy, so I'm not going to risk it. So I keep him from charging the jockey's room on Derby Day. I had bet a little place money on the horse, the long shot horse. So I give Dad half of that. We bet the next race. We miss. Dad says, I don't feel like standing around here for 6 hours and not betting. I have work I could do at home. How about we just leave and I promise to bring you back another year. And I'm like, well, I really would like to see the Derby, Dad. And he's like, nah, let's just go back. I need to do this work and I promise you we'll get back. So we walk back to the truck, and when we get to the truck, it's not only is there not an aisle in front of us, you couldn't get the truck out of that yard with a helicopter. There are cars in every direction, and we're right up against this chain link fence. So Dad's upset for a few minutes, but he cools down. I mean, we're just stuck. There's nothing we can do. And we figure out pretty quickly that we don't have enough money to get back into the track. So we're just stuck in this parking lot. So we sit out there all afternoon, and we talk about racing. We talk about baseball. We talk about life. And we listened to my first Derby on the radio of that truck. And it wasn't the way we planned it, but it's something I'll always remember. And by the way, he did take me back and made good on the promise at a later date.
Fabulous stuff. Thank you for that, Mike. This book, once again, Betting with an Edge. Find it on Amazon. Find it in the DRF store. If you're looking for a signed copy, hit me up at Looms Boldly. I want to thank Mike Maloney. I want to thank JK, as always. Many terrific observations from the two. I'll be back on the air tonight, 7 o'clock. The great Andy Beyer and Mike Watchmaker will be joining. That's going to be a lot of fun. You can sign up to join live. You can check out the replay of this and other great DRF Derby content. DRF.com/YouTube is the place. We will be back to recap all the goings on Tuesday. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. May you win all your photos.